Fly fishing in general is intimidating enough for people who are trying to get into it, but you do not have to be a good single-hand fly fisherman to learn how to spey.
Dang, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about like just the body mechanics of the difference between casting to the two and how one might be easier than the other.
Have you ever caught a pike on the figure eight?
Thinking about the actual leverage points, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Welcome to Wildlife Outdoors with your host, Russell and Jose. If you have a passion for conservation of the outdoors, or you're enjoying a calming hike in the mountains, an exhilarating kayak trip on the river, feeling a fish on the end of your line, cooking on an open flame in a primitive campsite, or stalking big game, just waiting for the perfect shot, you're in the right place. So put on your boots and polarized sunglasses and come along for the ride.
Welcome back to another episode of Wildlife Outdoors. Today we're thrilled to welcome an adventure enthusiast here with us that's actually from out west. So lately she's been exploring steelhead and spey fishing. So welcome, Laura. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
You're in from Washington, right? Idaho area, somewhere around that border?
Eastern Washington, North Idaho. I spend a lot of time between the two.
That's awesome. So out there is far different than Western Washington from what I've heard. Is that true?
To be honest, I don't spend any time in Western Washington, but yes, it is very different landscape. A lot less people out this way. So it's really different, but I have not explored over the Cascades. So
I see. That's awesome. Yeah, I've spent a little bit of time over in Seattle area, so that's really the only experience I have in Washington. It was gorgeous over there, but it's not a place that I would look at and think anything about steelhead or hunting or anything like that for sure. So.
You know, Western Washington has some great steelheading, from what I understand.
Really?
They come in through that area, but I just don't. I have a good friend who's from that area, and he goes out there steelheading. I'm like, but they're right here. Why are you going way out there? You don't have to spey fish for them in a lot of those rivers. You can use a single hand rod and be fine. But I'm fancy, so had to get into spey fishing. Fancy, and I don't like having any money apparently.
All right. So how long have you been trying to spey fish for?
So I got my spey rod last year. I was borrowing, we have a local fly shop. They let me borrow a demo rod, and we went out to a river. It's right on the cusp of Idaho, Eastern Washington, and it actually goes into Oregon. And I brought my single hand rod. I was feeling really ambitious, and the guy at the fly shop, a good buddy of mine, was like, listen, a bad spey cast on that river is going to be better than any good single hand cast. He's like, so bring it with you just in case you need it. And I'm like, I'm not going to use it. I don't want to get into spey fishing. Like, I've got so much invested in all my single hand gear. And I got down there, made like 5 casts, and I'm like looking over at my significant other who's just like bombing casts across the river. I'm like, okay, this is BS. Like, give me that stupid spey rod. So that was last winter, and this is I'm going into my first like full season with my own gear. I've already gone down on a steelheading trip, and that was awesome. I had a friend come with me, and he dialed me in on spey casting, so now basically I'm a professional.
Oh, totally. It's so easy to pick up like that, isn't
it? I was doing okay before he helped me, and then he just helped me tweak just a couple things that I was doing wrong, like not lifting the rod high enough or not making big enough movements, and that was game-changing. Like, just tweaking those couple of things, like, now, when he casts beside me, it is sad, but now I'm like, I have so much more confidence. So I'd say fly fishing in general is intimidating enough for people who are trying to get into it, but you do not have to be a good single-hand fly fisherman to learn how to spey. So I would actually say that there were some habits that I had from single-hand that didn't translate over very well. So I'm like, if you didn't know how to fly fish at all, this would actually be great.
I see. I've actually heard a lot of people say that those that are not conventional fishermen prior to becoming fly fishermen, it's easier for them to pick it up because they don't pick up those bad habits from fishing conventional gear. So I could see how that would kind of translate the same way towards spey from fly.
Yeah. lucky for me, I'm not great at fly fishing in general. So I get lucky is what I like to say. But no, I've been fly fishing for probably 4 years now as of this month, and then I've been spey fishing. This is my first full season. I went out a handful of times last year, and they're just different. They're just
Yeah, that's
completely
freaking
different.
crazy.
So.
Yeah, I've only spey fished maybe 5 times, and it wasn't typical spey fishing like you would out west. It was, we have a couple dams here in Hot Springs, and the striper will run up there when they're running generation. And one of my buddies said, "Hey man, you can get out there with a spey rod and try to hook into a striper." And so my experience of spey fishing is watching quite a few videos on YouTube, and then playing them in slow motion to try to figure out the motions on how to do a snap T cast or whatever, and go out there for hours trying to learn how to get this cast down.
Right.
And I've gotten some pretty decent casts, but I've yet to catch a fish on spey. So
I've never even tried it.
You've never even tried spey fishing?
No, I mean it's not really a thing here in Texas. Like I want to say that I maybe have heard of some folks trying it on the Guadalupe River. Maybe, I mean, but that I don't really see any other situations where someone would. So yeah, it's just different type of fishing than I guess we're to the point where we don't really like need it. But I've heard of people. I think there's a thing called like micro spey fishing or something like that. Like these smaller rods that kind of function the same way, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't think anyone's really caught on. Or is it switch rods? I don't even know. I get those two confused all the time.
But there's also a trout spey. So like the spey rod that I'm using.
That's it. Yes.
Yeah. Because we have a trout spey, and it's like a 5-weight. It's pretty short in comparison to your traditional spey rods. And it's great for some of our bigger water where we're still targeting, like the fish aren't huge. I mean, they can get pretty big, but you're going to be fine on a trout spey. But the full spey is still way different. You just have to make way more exaggerated casts. But I will tell you this. I got into a car accident a little over a month ago, and spey fishing, like the actual movements of spey itself, is easier on, like, because I've got whiplash issues, like, on the whole right side of my body. The spey fishing is so much easier on my body. Now, the walk weighting is not, but the actual movements, of not, like, picking it up and casting it out all day long, it is way easier on your body, so, like, you'll be out there all day. And it is really nice to have that. So then when I go back to my, like, 6-weight, I'm like, gotta huck this big old beast out there.
Dang, I didn't even think about that. I didn't even think about, like, just the body mechanics of the difference between casting to the two and how one might be easier than the other. So maybe even, like, folks with, like, shoulder injuries or whatever who maybe can't, or might be painful to cast a regular fly rod could do pretty well casting spey. Huh. That's pretty cool.
You can even set up a regular, like a normal fly fishing rod. So Adrian, my significant other, he has a reel that's loaded with, like, a heavy head on it. It's a single hand spey line. So it's that OPST. I think I heard you talking about spey casting for striper on Goose's podcast, on his episode. But you can actually put, like, spey line on a regular rod and just do a single hand spey. So your snap T cast. So you can still get that line out there really far. It's still not as, like, hard on your shoulders and stuff. But you're using the rod that you already have. You're just getting a new reel and putting new line on it. So for people who don't, your water is, like, wide and you want to reach the other side, but you don't have necessarily, like, you don't need, like, a 12, 13, 14-foot rod to go do it, then I would say that that's your way to go, is just do a single hand spey.
That makes sense. Yeah, I never thought about that because, my rod is a 14-foot 11-weight. That thing is huge.
God dang.
That's a really heavy rod. Like, go chase salmon with that.
Right. Well, I bought it because I've seen some striper that are, 30, 40, 50 inches here. So it's like, I wanted to have enough. I'd hate to not have enough if I were to hook into one of those, but
they're beefy.
It's thick.
So,
yeah.
But so when you were throwing your spey line, were you switching out the tips on it? Like, so you have your Spey head, and then you've got your leader, and then you, or on your Spey head, you'll tie a tip to it. And so that can be like a full flow, it can be a half flow, half sink, a full sink.
I have a full sink on it. No, it just has a full sink, and that's what stays on it. Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say, usually if I'm not finding fish, it's finding where they're at in the water column. So just try switching the heads out on them, because or not the head, but the tips, because that can make a big difference. So.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to try that. Yeah, the only reason I just wanted to get down as deep as I could, as fast as I could, because the water, I mean, when they're generating here, sometimes it's like 3,400 CFS. So it's like, and I'm at the dam, I want to get down as fast as I can.
Yeah. I mean, fair. I don't stand next to a dam when it's moving that fast, but
well, there's this spot. It's nice because there's this area where even when they're generating like that, because the water comes up pretty high, but just the way that it's like, it's maybe knee deep, if that, for a good 20 feet before it goes where it's just really rushing. So there's an area where you're almost standing in an eddy casting into the generation. Yeah. And it's out past the markers where they say you need to get from. So it's not at the dam, but it's, maybe 100 yards from the dam or whatever. And it's a real interesting place where you could stand in knee deep water casting into 3,400 CFS and be somewhat safe. So,
yeah, that I mean, because when you're talking about it, I was like, that sounds really sketchy, but that makes sense.
Pretty shallow water, almost in like a back eddy. It's a real interesting place. Hopefully, I'll catch some fish there someday. But
just, you know what, persistence pays off. So, but that's fishing, right? Like, you can go to a river that you know super well and still not do very great, but it's kind of how it was for me this spring. I didn't hook into any decent cutthroat until really this fall, and I was like, what the heck? I mean, I'm in the same spots I'm always in. The fish are always in these spots. Like, why can I not find the fish? And I don't know. Fish just didn't want to play. So
yeah,
that's how it goes.
I've had plenty of that. I try not to set my expectations when I go places because I always get disappointed. It's like, okay, I know I'm gonna go out here and I'm gonna catch a smallmouth. So you said that you've been fly fishing for going on 5 years now, 4 or 5 years. What got you into it?
Well, so my dad is originally from New England, and him and his dad used to fly fish together out there all the time. Way different, bamboo rods, blue lining, pulling little brookies out. Just a completely different style than what you get out west. But I grew up fishing with my dad and my grandpa, just off the pier and off the jetties and stuff out in California. And I had always wanted to learn how to fly fish. I've watched a river runs through it. So I really wanted to experience that. I just didn't know. Actually, I didn't learn that my dad used to fly fish until after I had gone into fly fishing.
Really?
I just knew he was from New England and it was a big deal there. And I'm like, gosh, I want to do that. And then I moved to Montana from Southern California. And I'd drive by and see everybody out there. And then finally, I moved up to North Idaho, and a buddy of mine offered to teach me. And that's kind of all she wrote. I hooked into my first fish. It was like a little 6-inch cutthroat, and I haven't looked back since.
Nice.
That is awesome. So have you actually gone and fly fished for brookies, or was that just regular fishing?
So I mainly target cutthroat and rainbows out here. We have a lot of cut bows, but we do have some areas, mostly lakes, that have brook trout.
I see. I want to get on a brook trout so bad. I don't know what it is. I would like to get into them in their native range, but they're just such gorgeous little fish. I want to catch one.
They're really pretty, and there are a couple of rivers in Montana that have some sizable brook trout. I've caught quite a few of them, but they're I think the biggest one I've ever caught was maybe an 8-9-inch brook trout, so nothing to write home about. But they're beautiful. I actually really like the small little brook trout because they're so colored up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm still on the hunt for a big brown too, and we've got a bunch of them. I just don't know how to find them.
Browns are so much fun. They dig and they fight. And I got 2 years ago, Jose, that we got on our first browns.
Was it 2 years ago or 3? I don't even remember anymore, man.
Maybe 3 years ago, something like that. We went on a trip up there on the White, and got into some browns up there, and I got into a sizable cutthroat as well. But yeah, I want to get a brookie so bad. Actually, I was watching a video earlier today. I don't remember where. Well, I want to say it was Chesapeake Bay, maybe. But there's actually some small areas where there's sea run brook trout, where they'll get a little bit more chrome on them and stuff. I was like, I didn't even know that there were sea run brookies. But there's this one specific stream that connects to, I want to say it's Chesapeake Bay. I was like, interesting. But they were catching a few of them, and they're just such gorgeous fish.
They're really pretty, and so the one that I caught that it's probably like a 15-inch brook trout. I was a little disappointed because it wasn't as like colored up as I was expecting it to be, and apparently the lake or brook trout don't get as vibrant. And I was like, dang, I was hoping it was going to be like one of those really beautiful brook trout. The little ones that I catch are way prettier,
right?
But we like Fish and Game and people up here don't want them in the river systems. So you're supposed to, if you catch them, you're supposed to bank them. And I don't know if I should say this on a recording, but I just can't do it. I don't like to kill anything that I'm not planning on eating or that is not directly like a threat to my safety. So I'm not killing a brook trout just because it's there.
I agree with that.
Is it because, so I'm not familiar with that. Is it because they're not native to the rivers in that particular system?
And they compete with the cutthroat.
Gotcha.
So I want to say it was back in the 60s. There's a part of our river system that was used for logging, and they basically straight cut the river so that the logs would go down to the bottom. And Trout Unlimited came in and did this like multi-million-dollar project where they re-snaked the river, and they used like logs and stuff to stabilize the banks and to slow the river down so that the cutthroat had somewhere to spawn, because between the logging and them not having spawning ground and people overfishing them, we almost lost all of them. So Trout Unlimited rehabbed the population, and now like the record cutthroat out of that river is a 21-inch cutthroat, which is really big. And so they've been doing amazing, but they're all still protected. So they're all catch and release, but then when we get like brook trout in there, they're afraid they're going to compete with the cutthroat, and they don't want them in there. They're not native here. So,
yeah, that makes sense.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That's kind of similar to what they're doing here in Arkansas and in the Ozarks going into like Missouri and Oklahoma. There's the Neosho bass, which has recently been reclassified as its own species in comparison to being a subspecies of the smallmouth like it was previously thought. And the Neosho bass doesn't get nearly as large as the smallmouth. And the northern smallmouth will get like, 20, 22, 24 inches, but the Neosho bass will only get about 14, 15 inches. So they're trying to get it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get the departments of natural resources to actually lower the size limit for keeping smallmouth to 14 inches. That way, it's not only northern smallmouth that because the thing is, the northern smallmouth is also indigenous here. So we have 4 species of smallmouth bass that are within the Ozark and a little bit south from that. So we have the Neosho bass, the smallmouth bass, which is the Micropterus dolomieu, and then there's 2 others that they're trying to get reclassified to their own species, which is going to be like the Washita bass and the Little River bass. And they're all very similar to smallmouth, but there's variations between them. And the Neosho bass is slightly different, but it lives in the same waters as the northern, and they don't want them to outcompete one another. And so they're thinking about changing size limits. That way they can give the Neosho a little bit more,
chance.
Because if you're going to catch a 14-inch fish, most likely it's going to be, if it's a Neosho, it's going to be at the end of its life anyways. But if you can lower the amounts of smallmouth in the stream, it's going to help with the population of Neosho. So they're doing something kind of similar to that here with the smallmouth species.
That sounds tricky because I was unaware that there were so many subspecies of smallmouth, or now they're segregating in its own species. But we catch smallmouth up here all the time, and they get really big. Like our largemouth, I'm assuming because the water is colder, people have pulled out double-digit largemouth. I have not. But our smallmouth are just everywhere. So the likelihood of you catching a smallmouth over a largemouth is super high. But they're all different, like color variations. Some of them have like the greenish brown eyes. Some of them have red eyes. Some of them are like gold. And then some of them are really like tiger striped almost. So now I'm curious to know, are those different subspecies of bass, or are they just
As far as I know of, I don't believe they are, because the same scientists that were doing a lot of the studies in the Ozarks have also done a lot of study in up north and in like Ohio and in Georgia and stuff like that. And they're saying this is the only place in the nation that they know of different species and or subspecies of smallmouth.
That's awesome.
So it's mainly, I don't know what caused it, but they're saying actually the Micropterus velox, which is the Neosho bass, actually separated from the ancestry of the smallmouths prior to what the northern smallmouth did.
Okay.
So they're thinking it possibly has something to do with the Ozark Plateau, and then the mountain ranges that formed on that plateau, being the Boston Mountains and St. Francis Mountains that have separated streams and watersheds, is what caused it. And there's no other place in the country like that. So yeah, it's very interesting. It's all new research that I think was started like in like the 2010s. So it's all new stuff that's still currently going on.
Yeah, so scientists are still working on it.
I've been watching that. So yeah, it's crazy.
That is so cool that people dedicate their lives to learning stuff like this. Because I love fish, but it's a lot of consistent, just comparing and contrasting like similar results, and I don't think I have the bandwidth for that. So I'm glad somebody out there is smarter than I am and can do that.
Right.
So
I don't know if I'd be able to do it day in and day out. I don't think I have the mental aptitude for that, but I love learning about it and trying to retain what I can from others that know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is crazy the differentiations of colorations you can get from different species. I mean, hell, we talked about it on a previous podcast when it comes to the Rio Grande cichlid in Texas, how the ones in Houston vary from those caught in the Austin region. But as far as we know, they're all the same species. They've just been separated for long enough that they're starting to get different characteristics and colorations.
Interesting. Yeah. Then, so up here, gosh, we have smallmouth, largemouth. I do a lot of smallmouth fishing, late spring, early summer, and then my new thing is chasing pike. We have northern pike and tiger muskie up here. I have yet to catch a tiger muskie, but I'm working on it. But the pike fishing, I will tell you, their fight, you can get them into the boat super easy. And we fly fish, obviously, for them. It's not the fight, it's the eat.
Yeah.
The take on a pike is, because a lot of the time you can see them come in to eat it. We have a buddy that lives down in central Idaho in a town called McCall, and he came all the way up to the Coeur d'Alene area to go pike fishing. And so, we picked a lake, we went out, and I had a strike, and I saw it because I was going to recast my line, and it hits the fly, and I missed him because I wasn't expecting it, and I was like, I kind of popped the fly up. I was like, did you guys see that? And when I did that, I just kind of flopped it back in the water so we didn't hook ourselves. And as I said that, he came back a second time and ate it again, and that time I got him, and I was like, wow, he is so, eager, because, with a trout, you might get lucky and get a second chance. Yeah. But especially on a streamer eat, they eat it the one time, they realize you're BSing them, and then they're done.
Yeah.
But with pike, they'll hit it multiple times, and you're just like, this is freaking awesome. And being able to watch them just, come right up to the surface and just hit your fly right at the edge of the boat. So, besides steelheading, because we're out of pike season, so spring I do smallmouth, spring, summer, pike, and then split my time between that and trout fishing. But I was just looking for something different, so I don't know. I also like tying big flies, so I think that's why steelhead flies and pike flies are really fun for me to tie, because I will not tie it dry. I can tie a stimulator, and Goose forced me to learn how to do that, and I'm like, this is not for me. This is boring. I don't have enough material on this thing.
Right.
So
I love fishing for toothy critters.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I can't stand tying small flies, like little size 18 midgets and stuff. My fingers are too fat. I don't have the dexterity for it. It's super frustrating. And we don't have pike here in Texas, although I think they tried to stalk them at one time in Austin, because there's some water body records. There's a record of a pike, and if I'm not mistaken, in Austin. So I think it was a thing at one point, potentially. But even though we don't have pike, I know what you mean. I love tying big flies, even though I don't have anything to throw them at really, except for maybe striper, and gar, I guess. But yeah, big flies are where it's at. It's so much fun.
Just tie some big flies and gift them to your buddies that live in areas that have muskie and like me. So I actually tied goose, one of my favorite flies to tie, because I learned how to spin deer hair for this particular fly, which is above my pay grade, but they worked out. And called a Bow River bugger. My buddy Tyler posted a video on YouTube years ago, and I found it, and I was like, hey, I know that guy. I'm like, I'm going to tie that. That doesn't look too bad. I tied a bunch of them, caught some really incredible fish, and then I shipped a couple to Goose, and he caught just a massive rainbow. And I'm like, told you they work.
That's freaking awesome.
So I love tying streamers.
Yeah, streamers are so much more fun.
A Bow River bugger?
Bow River bugger. When we're done, I'll send you guys the link to that video. But they're awesome for bass. They're awesome for trout. Like, you can throw them at damn near anything, and they'll eat it. So
awesome. Yeah,
it's super easy to tie. It's not complicated. But that and slump busters. I like tying slump busters too.
Yeah,
those are easy, but they look really great in the water.
Yep,
gotta love all that movement. So going back to kind of the pike fishing, I have a question. Have you ever caught a pike on the figure eight?
I cannot figure out how to figure eight a fly rod because the tip section just doesn't have enough backbone. I do have a spinning rod that I'll probably bring with me this next pike fishing season just to switch it up a little bit, and I've got some big like whopper ploppers and stuff that I like throwing, but I'm like, I'm going to try the figure eight then. But no, I've definitely caught when I drag the fly line across the edge of the boat, but not in a figure eight.
Yeah, I asked that because I have yet to catch one. I've had them strike numerous times on the figure eight, and because normally when I'm out there fishing for them, I'll either have a 6-weight or an 8-weight, which I no longer have my 8-weight, so it'll be the 6-weight next time I go out. And I've been able to figure eight it. I just got to stick damn near the second section in there and kind of use both hands to try to figure eight it right on the side of the kayak, because I'm always kayak fishing. And the place that I fish for them, there's a lot of hydrilla. And so I've gotten it to figure eight, and I've gotten strikes, but I've never been able to hook up with them. And I don't know if it's because my rod's in the water so deep. So if you knew how, I was going to ask how, because there's been numerous times where they follow, and they're not ready to commit until I figure eight, and then I can't get a hook set. So.
Well, that's what I was thinking, actually, when you were saying that. You know, at least when I drag the fly across the edge of the boat, I can still keep my hand on my line to strip set it.
Yeah.
They've got hard mouths, so you've got to really yank them.
Yeah.
But with a figure eight, I just don't know if you can get that same leverage, because like you would have to kind of trout set it, and I don't know if you could get that same leverage. It's a lot different on these guys who are throwing, you know, bait casters and spinning reels, because you've got big treble hooks, and it doesn't take much to hook.
Yeah.
And then there's only one motion, so it's like, I don't know. If you figure out if it's possible, you let me know, because when I'm thinking about the actual like leverage points, it just doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't make sense to me either, and that's probably why I've been unsuccessful. But we have a lot of pickerel here, and then I've been fishing for northern pike up in Alaska. But a tiger muskie is one that I want to get on so damn bad. And there's an area that I've been told that has some up in Missouri, probably about 5.5 hours from me. And I'm hoping to make it up there soon and try to get on some. I mean, really any muskie, I'm fine. But tiger muskie, they're just their coloration is amazing. So I would love to get on one of those.
Yeah. We've got a couple lakes, and my friends that bass fish like religiously are like, the trick with tiger muskie is to go bass fishing and don't target them and go target bass, and you'll catch tons of pike and tons of tiger muskie. And I'm like, they're like, we actually hate the damn things because they always take our like spinner baits. And I'm like, yeah, I can see how that'd be annoying, you know, when you're running lures that are $5 to $10 a piece. That's frustrating. But I've never caught a tiger muskie. I've also never spent any time targeting.
Yeah.
So that's not helpful.
Well, they say muskie are the fish without the cast, so.
So pardon my ignorance, but is a tiger muskie like its own individual species, or is it like a hybrid of a muskie and something else? Like what?
I believe it's a hybrid.
It's a
Okay.
It's a hybrid between a muskie and a
northern
pike.
pike.
So they're sterile. They don't reproduce. So they'll put them in a lot of bodies of water where they're trying to control certain fish populations. But then they don't reproduce because part of the problem with actually our northern pike, I live on a lake out here I'm in a town called 9 Mile Falls, and there's a lake called Long Lake, and we used to have like record pike. And then Fish and Game went and netted them all, well, most of them, because they were just wreaking havoc on their rainbow trout that they were stocking and the smallmouth. And now it's not worth pike fishing this lake. They also net all the carp, which is a real bummer because carp on the fly is targeting them is fun. I've never actually hooked into a carp on the fly, but I would like to. And now my odds are lower in this lake because they've net a lot of them out. So that's why they're using tiger muskie, because if they put pike in, they'll reproduce and end up taking over a lake, but the tiger muskie won't. So
that makes sense. I never looked at it in that aspect of why they were stalking tiger muskie, but that definitely makes a lot of sense. I assumed it was kind of like a tiger trout. Like sometimes you'll just get a hybrid.
No, we don't have regular muskie here, so
I see.
It's got to be something that some hatchery somewhere is creating and sending out to us. We buy them apparently. I don't know how that all works. I'd assume that's kind of how it works. But I was actually out on this lake and I was fishing out of the kayak, and I come back in and there's a guy in his little like float tube fishing. He's on a 4-weight fishing for crappie and bluegill, and he's like, I hooked into a crappie. I'm stripping him in. I get him all the way up in between my legs, and a massive tiger muskie just like chomps down on this crappie. And then on his 4-weight, he's now hooked into a like lake monster, and he's in this little float tube. And I'm like, I don't know how to help you, but it was pretty epic. I'm like, damn, I wish you would have landed that. That would have been so cool.
That would have been insane.
But it'd be really scary though to be in a float tube and have something with that many teeth like come right up in between your legs.
Yeah.
I'd not be all right with that.
Right. Yeah, those things are extremely toothy. And so whenever I grab them, I gill them, grab them by the gill plate, and so their mouth always opens, and I always just admire how many teeth they have and how sharp. I mean, it's crazy how broad their mouths are, and they're just lined with like it's an awesome sight. But you're right, one coming towards the middle of my legs, I'm good. I'll pass.
Yeah, like you're sitting in the water with it, and I actually, when I first realized I wanted to get into pike fishing, it was before I got into fly fishing. So I had my kayak out, I launched, I fish a lot by myself, which, I was like, oh, that's fine, I've got this. I've bass fished all this time by myself, and I'm out there, I'm like, surely if I get into a situation, there's always a bunch of bass boats and other fishermen, like somebody will help me if I just say, hey, can you help me? I get out there, not a soul in sight. And I'm like, all right, okay, that's fine. So I launch my kayak, I get out there, I'm throwing big spinner baits, and something just huge hits it. And then I realize I don't have clamps to like grab it, and I have to get it into the kayak, get the hook out, and I'm completely by myself on this lake, and I have no idea what to do now. And luckily it ended up getting off the line, which is fine, because in hindsight I was like, I didn't really think this plan through very well. So yeah, I was dead set on going to catch a pike or a tiger muskie by myself, and then when the opportunity presented itself, I changed my mind pretty quick.
Yeah, those people do that.
Now I'd be okay. Yeah, there's something a little unnerving about having one of those fish up in your lap, like in a kayak, and
The first time I ever experienced anything like that, I went and did a pickerel fishing tournament here, and I'd never caught anything like that before until that tournament. And on those tournaments, you have to put them on a catch board or a hog trough. You have to measure them. You have to have your indicator. So we had a captain's meeting prior to the launch of the tournament, and they'd give you a code that you'd have to write on your hand or a piece of paper and have it in the picture of the length of the fish. And so I'm having to worry about the fish being flat, the mouth being closed, it being lined up on the hog trough properly, and having the indicator. So I was like, completely out of my element, had never done any type of tournament before. And then I'm dealing with this toothy critter at the same time. It was like I was way too overstimulated trying to get this done. But I fared, pretty well. I came in fourth in that tournament, and it wasn't a fly only tournament. I was fly fishing on a kayak, and it was a KBA tournament. And so there was people out there with conventional gear and people running Alabama rigs and stuff like that. So I think I did pretty well for my first tournament, but it was definitely unnerving.
Yeah, I'd say. Getting fish to cooperate is fun, but I am awful at holding fish. So like the pike that I caught were not huge. I mean, I've got pictures of them on my Instagram. They were satisfying enough for my first real time out, like targeting them. I was pretty excited to just have fish on the boat. They are actually a fish that I will keep to eat. I let a lot of my other fish go, but pike is quite tasty, and they're really plentiful. I'm not worried about their population. So, but like holding them was a little scary at first, and then holding steelhead. Oh my gosh, I don't know how these people hold these fish, and like they look all majestic holding their giant rainbow trout. And, like if you look at my pictures of my steelhead that I've caught, I'm cradling them like a baby. Because that's the only way I can hold on to them. But I have a series, those are the good pictures that I posted, but I have a series of pictures where I'm like literally hugging this fish and it's like in my hair and I'm covered in fish slime. I'm like, oops, I hope that fish is okay. But I'm like, it happened the second time we went just a few weekends ago, and I'm like, not again. Like, why can I not hold on to these freaking fish?
There's a Facebook page that has nothing but pictures of people like taking a picture of them like dropping a fish or a fish wiggling out of their arms. Yeah. It's hilarious because all their faces are priceless. So you touched on eating pike. How do you prepare pike? I've never eaten pike myself or pickerel or anything like that.
So the tricky part is learning how to fillet them. Mm-hmm. They're super slimy. So there are some people that'll like soak them in a vinegar, like a white vinegar water mixture to strip the slime off. I didn't have time for that because you have to let them sit like overnight, and you don't gut the fish because the way you fillet them, the body cavity is still all intact, so you never have to actually gut them. I see. But the tricky part is they've got a Y bone, so you just fillet them out, and I fry them. So I think we made like fish tacos or something with them. They're awesome.
Awesome. And so you just kind of go down the spine and over the ribs, or how do you fillet them?
So the way I did it is I went from behind the gills off on the side, and then I went down. And then there's a section where you can feel that Y bone, and you can like kind of cut alongside of it and like just cut them off, and then you can take there's a big piece of meat on the back, so on top of them. Actually, no, that's what I did. Now that I'm thinking about it, I took that back piece off down to the spine because that's how I could see the Y bones. And then when I could see the Y bones, I just took my knife and flayed right along the side of that. So
awesome. I may have to do that sometime.
Yeah, it's not too bad. People complain about it a lot. You know, a lot of people are like, I don't like pike, it's too bony. I'm like, well, you're just not preparing it right.
Right.
Along with a lot of things, right? Like wild game. When people complain about wild game, like, you just don't know how to cook, apparently.
Yeah. I hear that with ducks a lot. Everybody talks about ducks being too gamey or too like livery, but I know duck is so good. The times I've had, it's been very good. I think it's just people who overcook it because there's like duck can go bad real fast if you overcook it.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite hunting out of all. Like, you know, all I do is bird hunting, but I love, besides sitting in a duck blind and freezing to death, I just feel like there's so much action in a duck blind. You don't have to be super quiet. Like, you can eat snacks. You can have like a party in your blind until the ducks come in. And then it's just fun. You go out, you throw your decoys out and set up the blind. I feel like I'm decorating a house. So up here it's just super cold. It gets cold early into our duck season, so we're busting through ice to put decoys out and stuff. So that's kind of a bummer.
See, I've never hunted in ice. I would like to. I mean, duck hunting, I don't hunt much, I must admit, but back when I did go duck hunting, that was my favorite by far. It was just really fun to watch the birds work the decoys. My buddy had an awesome duck dog. It was really fun to watch him get after those birds. And it was just kind of like you said, like you don't have to be quiet. You just got to be still. And
talk to your friends.
Yeah, and it's awesome. It's a cool, really, really cool experience. And I've seen videos where like some, I guess, like in the like big outfits and stuff like that, they have like full on kitchens. Like these duck blinds are freaking insane. They're like houses on the water. They got TVs, they got stoves, they got the whole nine, and it's just insane. But super bougie. I think I don't know if that's the kind of duck hunting. I mean, I'd like to experience it, but I'd get too spoiled too fast doing it like that. But yeah, duck hunting is just awesome.
There's something about the suffering though that we have to go through whenever we're hunting that I don't know if I think it makes me appreciate the animal more. So like it would be fun to go on a really luxurious hunt like that, but I really like the grind. Like duck hunting, you're up super early. You know, you got to put the boat in the water. I mean, I guess you don't have to if you can find a spot. Most of our spots, you have to go put a boat in the water. You got to get your decoys out. You're in cold water. You got to wear waders. Like, it's just your fingertips are frozen, so everything's just like painful. I will say that the guys that I hunt with, we bring a buddy heater, like a little propane buddy heater. That thing is amazing until it runs out of propane. Then you're cold again. Because then you got spoiled and you're like, oh, my heater's dead and now I'm going to be cold. But I don't know how to do the duck calls yet. So just sometimes I sit there and I don't even shoot at the birds. I watch them shoot at the birds. I watch the entire process. So them calling the birds in, you know, them putting their landing gear out to come in for a landing. And then I watch them like take the birds and they're like, why didn't you shoot? I'm like, it's just so freaking cool to watch the entire process, and I can't do that if I'm focused on shooting. So
yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, that's unfortunately I have never been duck hunting, and I am pretty close.
Even
a couple
though you
hours from some of the
live
best
in the
hunting
duck
in the country.
capital, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I need to get out there. I've actually talked to a few people this year, and I think I'm going to make it happen. And if I don't make it happen here in Arkansas, I am pretty sure I'm going to be able to go to a lodge in Texas. I've already been invited to that, and I'm pretty sure I can make that happen. So hopefully I'll get out and do some duck hunting this year for the first time.
I hope for you that you get out and do some duck hunting because it is just, it's unreal. Like there's so much shooting. It's by far one of my favorite things to do. I kind of suck at it, to be honest. I'm a really good shot with my shotgun. Like I shoot trap and this is how I teach new people who are unfamiliar with guns how to become familiar with guns. We go play a round of trap.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, on a bad day, I'm shooting 17, 18. On good days, I'm hitting 20, 21 out of 25. And then I'll go out duck hunting and I'm like, there was a whole flock and I missed every single one of them. How did that happen? Good at water sluicing them, but not as fun to shoot them. Like it's way more fun to shoot them on the wing. I know that's a whole controversy too. Some people say it's like unethical to shoot them while they're on the water, but I'm like, well, if I'm hunting them for meat, like, what's the difference? A dead bird is a dead bird.
Right.
Like, so to me, I'm like, I'm out here putting food on the table, so if that's how I've got to shoot them, that's how I've got to shoot them.
Right.
Sure.
Hey.
Better than me putting bad shots and injuring a flying bird, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But
absolutely.
It's crazy how humbling bird hunting truly is. Like, I remember during duck hunting and like dove hunting and stuff before, like leading up to it, my buddies and I would go to some like one of the landowners. He would let us go shoot skeet out there, and we'd just go and we would just practice and we'd play. There was a shooting game we'd like to play called Annie Oakley. That was a lot of fun. And then we go out and we're like doing pretty good. We're busting a ton of clays. We're feeling pretty good ourselves. We go out there and probably cleared a whole box and got maybe 3 birds. Like, what the hell happened?
it's like grouse hunting. Whenever I'm not walking around with a gun, I spook grouse left and right. And then I go out there hunting, looking for them. I don't see any damn birds. And I'm like, but they were just here. So where did they go? Grouse hunting's, everybody tells me it's super easy. All my buddies are all elk hunters. And they're like, we literally see hundreds of them. like, well, I'm not hunting where you're hunting because I don't want to mess up your elk hunt. So, but a couple years ago, I picked up a 308 Ruger American, and I've been really wanting to get into big game hunting. All my buddies do it. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to practice this year, get, dialed in with my rifle, and I've had the gun for 2 years, and I've put 6 rounds total through it.
Oh.
I went out, bought the scope, bought all the ammo when it was super hard to find. Like, after COVID, it took a long time for the shelves to be full again. So any box of 308 that I would find, I'd snag. And so I've got all the ammo, I've got the scope on, I've got the rifle, and it's just a closet ornament. So
well, get out there and shoot
I should
it.
probably change that.
You should.
I'm working. I think next month when my schedule opens up a little bit more, I think I'll probably go out and practice because I want to be prepped for next season. I want to shoot a mule deer.
That would be awesome.
So, they're big.
I want to get a muley myself. So you talked about grouse hunting. Is grouse hunting similar to that of like pheasant and quail? Do you have to flush them or what's the process of that?
So I don't use a dog. So the process for us, we, usually you find like a forest road that people are not really driving on. Well, definitely not that people are driving. Don't shoot off the road. But like an old Forest Service road. Mm-hmm. So you walk up the road where there's young trees, where there's a lot of food and stuff for them, and then they want big roosting trees too. So you walk up a little bit, and however far you want, and then you stop and you wait, because what happens is they get nervous, and when they get nervous, then they'll flush. So it's kind of you walk a little bit and you wait. So when you're hunting with a dog, usually they can tell you where the birds are, but I don't have a hunting dog, so just got to do it the old school way of walking, waiting, walking, waiting. It's really fun, and I mostly end up picking a bunch of mushrooms and maybe coming home with a bird, but not typically. Not typically. I usually end up with a bunch of mushrooms. So.
That's awesome. What kind of mushrooms do y'all have up there?
Oh, we've got a lot of different kinds of mushrooms that are edible. The main thing I pick is morels in the spring and chanterelles in the fall, but we also have matsutake, which is a pretty prized mushroom in Japan. They're not super popular here, but I slice them up thin and I throw them in my rice cooker, and it gives the rice the flavor of the mushroom.
That's awesome.
You can batter them and deep fry them. I've made ramen with them, or miso, you can put them in your miso. So matsutake, king boletes, or the Boletus edulis. It's a really good one, and they're huge. They're gigantic tops on them. They look like a loaf of bread. So got blue chanterelles, purple chanterelles. So I'm out there looking for everything. But awesome. I've put in a lot of time, kind of like our fish nerd biologist friends who put in a lot of time to studying that. I put in a lot of time just reading books and blogs about mushrooms, and I challenge myself to identify a new one once a year, or once a season, I guess. And that's how I've learned how to identify all these mushrooms. Nobody taught me. I just, morels. I had currently, my current boyfriend, he is the one who taught me how to pick morels. But other than that, I taught myself about all these forest finds.
That's awesome. How was y'all's morel season this year?
It was okay, at the beginning of the season. So a lot of my usual spots were not good, so I had to go out and find new spots, which was wonderful. I got into a spot where they were pine cone sized morels, and they were everywhere.
That's awesome.
And so that was freaking rad because I found a new spot that I'm going to go pick next year. But a lot of reading elevations on Onyx and stuff because, with the change of the weather as it gets warmer, you go up in elevation. So just looking for those elevation changes and different sides of the mountain on Onyx is typically how I pick my spots.
I see.
But
yeah, here in Arkansas and in Missouri this year, it was rough. I know a lot of people that go and forage, and a lot of people that are normally posting pictures of bushels of them got none this year. And normally I'll come across some, you know, when I'm out hiking, and I didn't see any morels this year. I did come across some yellow chanterelles, but yeah, no morels here. At least from the people that I know that normally forage, didn't find any. And then there's some people that I know that were buying them from people that were foraging in Missouri because it was so tough.
That's one thing, because I'm like, I've got like bags and bags of them, and I'm like, I should sell them because I've dehydrated all of them. And I'm like, I should sell some, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, but I don't know if what I'm going to sell them for was actually worth what I went through to get these morels. Like, I hiked some serious terrain for that. So I actually really just like to keep them, and then I'll barter with them. So when, you know, buddies shoot an elk, I'm like, hey, I'll trade you some of my morels that I picked this season for some elk meat.
Yeah.
And I'll use it as a bartering system. I gift them to people. I give them to friends who can't, like, physically go out and do these hikes anymore. So I could sell them if I wanted to, but I like blessing other people with them. So
Right. That's awesome. Yeah, I want to get out and forage more. I don't do much.
Sorry, have you ever found chicken of the woods?
I did, but it was an older one, so it wasn't super great. Like, I still ate it, but they come back in the same spot every year, so I'll have to check that spot again. But it's not super prolific in our area. It's more prolific on the West Coast. So a lot of it in, like, Northern California, Oregon, Western Washington. Not as prolific here, but they do exist.
Because I went to South Carolina for some work, and I met a guy out there, and he had brought some. I mean, and he cooked them up. He like chicken fried them, pretty much like little chicken fingers. Holy cow. They were amazing.
Chicken tenders.
Yeah.
That's how the king boletes are, as far as like the texture of them being almost like meaty. A fresh king bolete it's a porcini mushroom. So, you know, you slice them up and they have different textures inside of them, but you can essentially, if you wanted to, replace like whatever protein, like meat, that you wanted to eat that night with this giant mushroom. So I really like the texture of the king boletes. I'd say my favorite mushroom is probably the morel because it's so different. But chicken of the woods is good. I found a cauliflower mushroom last year, which was my first time finding one of those, and super fun to find. It was like this big, curly, like weird mushroom, and I instantly knew what it was when we found it. I think Adrian found it and was like, "Hey, come over here and look at this weird thing." And I like kind of saw it. I'm like, "Oh my god, I've been looking for this forever." But that was a really cool mushroom, super good, texture's really good. There's a lot of stuff that's just kind of hanging out in the forest for free that people just walk right past, or they'll kick them for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah, there's a YouTube channel called Northwest Fishing Secrets that I follow, and he does a lot of foraging and stuff. He does a lot of fishing up there as well. But I'd never even heard of a king bolete until I saw him on his channel, and he had one where he found this massive one, and he was slicing it up and talking about how meaty it was. Oh, I need to try one of them. Yeah, I've done a bit of berry picking myself up in Alaska. Done some, wild strawberries, which are freaking phenomenal. It never ceases to amaze me how flavorful such a small strawberry can be. And they're like the size of your pinky nail, but they have far more flavor than an entire big one you get from the grocery store. And then they have currants there. They have high bush and low bush. Cranberries. They have blackberries, raspberries, blueberries. Fresh blueberries are to die for. There's just so many berries to be picked. We go hike Angel Rocks up there in Alaska outside of Fairbanks, and there's just so many berries to be picked. And then there's, fresh stream that the water's probably like 40, 50 degrees, and it's just, you have a whole picnic out there just waiting for you.
Yeah. Nature is just providing everything you need out there.
Absolutely.
I don't understand people who don't like to go outside and do stuff like that. It's hard for me to wrap my head around. I don't know. I've always loved being outside. That's why I needed out of California, because I was just in a concrete jungle all the time. And if I did go hiking, it was in the desert, which now I appreciate a lot more that I'm not in it. But at that time, I was like, ugh, I can only hike in January, February, maybe March if I'm lucky. And then I needed out of there. And this area, our forest is so dense and just so full of life. Like, there's so many things to do, and there's so many things you can hunt or forage. It's unreal. I can't believe I live out here.
Yeah, I've never been out west that direction. I mean, I've been to like Seattle on my way up to Alaska and stuff like that, but I've never been internal, and that's something I'm hoping to change here probably in the next year or so. But yeah, the forest over there that I've seen of Washington over near Seattle are just phenomenal.
Yeah, their side's a little different because they have more of that like temperate, like rainforesty. It's more damp out there. We have a lot of like white oaks and ponderosas, big cedar trees, so our forest is really different, both incredibly beautiful, but it's a completely different feel here. And if you come out to this section that we call like the inland northwest, I actually took Goose on this trip. He came up here from Missouri, and I met him out in Montana, out in Missoula, and took him on a fishing trip. It's actually really cute because he goes, "Wow, I'm just in awe of that mountain." And I'm like, "What mountain?" And he's like, "That one right there." I'm like, "Oh, that's a hill." That's just a hill. He's like, "What?" And I'm like, "See." But I'm like, I guess coming from like Illinois and Missouri and Arkansas, like I can see how you thought that was a mountain. All of these places that you can fish. I mean, the Clark Fork is one of them. It runs right through Missoula. That's not a secret. So, there are a couple creeks out there though that I'm like, I'm not telling you about those ones online. So, but that whole area, the Bitterroot runs through there, in the city. But then it doesn't look like you're fishing in the city because the way you have to go down the embankment, it's kind of like situated in like a weird pocket, and there are red bands. So, there's a lot to do. So if you guys ever end up out this way, just ping me and I'll show you guys where to go. And if I can get out there and fish with you guys, I will. But
awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely keep that in mind because I do plan on making a trip out there. And I want to explore pretty much the whole, I guess what you would call is, the inland Northwest is I want to try the whole Washington, the Idaho, Wyoming, Montana. I got invited to go this summer, like last month it was supposed to be, to go on a fishing trip in Montana, and the trip fell through, and I probably wouldn't have been able to go anyways, but they do it every year, every summer, so I'm hoping maybe next summer I might be able to make it out there.
Yeah. Are you guys going to be bringing like a drift boat or a raft, or are you guys walk wading it?
If I come up there, it'll most likely. If I'm on that trip, they do drift boats, I believe, maybe raft, one of the two.
Okay.
But if I make a trip,
that changes the game.
Yeah, but if I come up there just myself, it'll most likely just be waiting.
Okay. I mean, and there are spots that are accessible for both, but if you bring a drift boat or a raft up here, oh my gosh, I've been trying to convince Adrian to buy a raft so we can access more water. And his solution, because I was like, hey, I want to get to that stretch of water. And so he bought a longer Spey rod so he could just cast to it. I'm like, but we could buy a raft and just row to that spot. Like, come on. So one day I'm going to buy a raft. So
that's awesome. I have a few buddies that have recently gotten rafts, and I'm just like, God, I want a raft so bad because there's a lot of water here too that I would be able to get to with the raft. A lot of smallmouth fishing that I can do with a raft. So
yeah, rafts, like, because I compared and contrast, like, do I want a raft or a drift boat? And I just feel like for my first, I have no rowing experience. I don't whitewater raft. I'm like, I feel like a raft is more forgiving than a drift boat. And like if I like bang into a rock face or whatever, I'm not gonna like destroy my new boat.
Right.
From like, the raft will just bounce off of it and you'll be fine. So as I'm learning how to row, I think a raft makes more sense, but a drift boat is really freaking cool too. Yeah. And you just look really awesome in your drift boat going down river. Like that guy knows what he's doing.
Right. So, what you could do is you could just buy like a cheap aluminum John boat and like convert it into a drift boat, and that way you're not ruining a fiberglass boat.
Yeah, I could do that.
Kind of good aluminum
or I
welder.
Could just buy a raft. The rafts are super expensive. Like, so Tyler, my buddy, that he runs a fly shop out here that's attached to a store called North 40. So North 40 is like a Tractor Supply. You guys have Tractor Supplies?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like they have the landscaping equipment and all the things that you need. Well, this store, like the North 40 brand, started in Montana. and they attached fly shops to the stores that were near fly fishing water. So Tyler runs this fly shop. He's been a guide for I don't even know how long, like a long time. And he's the one who helped me dial in my Spey casting. Just freaking stellar human. Super, super knowledgeable about fishing. He actually helped build a lodge out on Christmas Island. So if you guys are familiar with Christmas Island, he helped build a lodge out there and guided out there for a long time.
That's
so I'm
awesome.
like, dang, you're like a real OG. He's not that old. That's what's so impressive. I'm like, how did you accomplish all of this in a short amount of time?
Right.
Anyways, he was telling me like, oh, a drift boat holds its value more than a raft does. I'm like, yeah, but I can always upgrade my raft to a drift boat later. It's not an insane investment.
Right.
Be different if I was looking at a bass boat. They're insane.
Yeah.
Some of those bass boats are more expensive than my new car. And I'm like, no, it's a boat. No way. But yeah, so I don't know. One day I'll have a raft, and then maybe I'll have a drift boat. I also need a duck hunting boat, so
just work your way up.
I've got a long list of expensive crap to buy. So
right, that's exactly how I feel. I heard something one time. It says boys never grow up; their toys just get more expensive. And I feel like that's me, because it's like as I get older, it's like I just want this and this and this and this and this for new hobbies that I get, or to improve on the hobbies that I already have.
Yeah, make your hobby experience more enjoyable, right?
Exactly, and be more successful doing it.
I saw a funny post, and it was like, they say the average adult spends $250 a year on their hobbies, and I was like, $250 a year on hobbies? Like, what? Like, who are those people? Do they actually have hobbies?
Right.
Like, is your hobby like coloring? But with like hunting, fishing, people who ski, like they're $250. That might pay for the food for the trip.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how they got the information from that study, but that is completely inaccurate.
I don't think that that's accurate. I'm like, your math is not adding up here. But
the math is not mathing.
So, anything else about this area, or anything you guys want to know about that I probably ADD'd out and missed?
Not really. There's nothing that really comes to mind about the region. I watch a lot of YouTube, so.
So you got all your information already from YouTube.
I watch, and it's weird because normally, like, a lot of the YouTube videos that pop up are other countries or Texas, but lately it seems like every video the freaking algorithm has been giving me has been out west. So I've been watching a lot of.
Telling you something.
It is, and I've had a very few from like Appalachia, as of recent, but a lot of them are out west. I'm like, that's why I'm saying I'm gonna make it out there, because that's one of those things.
You know what? The hardest part about getting out here is you won't want to leave. And I've lived in Montana. I've lived in California. Like, I've lived in a lot of places, and I've traveled to a lot of places. And I will tell you, there's nothing like this area. Just as far as what we have access to, like from my house, within an hour and a half, there's over 100 different lakes I go to, and all of them have fish in them. So, and that's just the lakes. So when you have those opportunities, the only thing that we don't have easy access to is hot springs. Like, the closest hot springs are 4 hours away. That's kind of a bummer, but that's okay. Small sacrifices, right? But the fish, like everything you could think of, I caught a few bull trout this year, which was really exciting. Awesome. Yeah, that's not an easy fish to find. Their numbers are really struggling, so we were super careful with those guys. But bull trout, brook trout, browns, lots of cutthroat, red bands. So lots of stuff to do up here. You guys will have to come out.
Absolutely.
You guys should go swing by and grab goose on your way out here.
I know, right? I would drive right through his area on my way up there, so I'll just swing by and pick him up, tell him to get in.
Hey, what are you doing? Come outside.
Right?
Bring a couple pieces of clothing with you.
Grab you a jacket, some waders, and a couple fly rods, and we're off.
Oh my gosh, make sure he freaking brings wading boots with actual soles on them. His sole fell off his wading boot like the first day of our trip. So he was walking around with like no sole on one boot. And he was carrying my rod, my new Sage rod, and I'm walking and I see where he's walking and I'm just about to tell him, don't step on that rock. And then he stepped on the rock and fell, and he's big, so like he's super tall. I'm like, that's a long way down. I fall. I'm 5'4". It's not that far to the ground. But he fell, and the first thing out of my mouth, instead of, oh my God, Goose, are you okay? I go, oh my God, is my rod okay? He's like, yeah, your rod's fine. I'm like, I meant to say, are you okay? But whew, thank goodness you didn't break it. So
that's hilarious. Yeah, breaking sage rod is
he's
not
hilarious.
fun. I've been there. I have one that's still broken sitting in the corner.
Well, this rod had already been broken prior. We took a 15-year-old kid out, and I had the rod for 6 months. He went up and above my rod because it was kind of like laying up on the bank, and we were tying a new fly on. And he walked up and above my rod, and it kicked a little like boulder loose, and it just went in slow motion, just snapped it in half. And I'm like, I can't beat up a 15-year-old. That's not appropriate. So
I've broken two. I've broken a Sage and a TFO Axiom 2X. Was able to get the TFO fixed within a week. Sage, it was during COVID or shortly after COVID, and they weren't doing repairs. I don't know if they are now. I haven't checked. But
they probably had to stop taking repairs. I feel like I sent mine in during COVID, and it took damn near 6 months to get it back to me. And my rod's, it's an expensive rod. They're probably $450, $500. That's what my assumption would be. But
yeah, well, we're coming up on time. So is there anything else that you want to talk about before we go ahead and start closing her out?
I don't think so. I think we talked about all sorts of stuff. We kind of jumped from fishing to foraging and hunting. Nice, better cut me off.
Well, we appreciate you hopping on. Where can the listeners find you if they want to find you on Instagram or something?
Instagram's definitely the best place to find me. It's where I post all of my fishing, hunting adventures, but it's just at Lara Yev. So the first 3 of my last name there, and that's it. Instagram's the best place.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the link in the description, and we appreciate you hopping on, and we'll catch y'all next time.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
This has been Wildlife Outdoors. Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook at Wildlife Outdoors and on Instagram at wild.life.outdoors. Let's go live life on the wild side.